Okay, guys, I'm going to go ahead and start. I have no idea if we're going to have more people, but Carol Smith, Superintendent, and thank you for being here for budget conversation. And I'm going to do, just since small group, I'm going to go ask you to introduce ourselves so I know where everybody is coming from. And you are first.
My name is Brian Sikori, and parent of a senior here, and I'm here on behalf of the music program.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Great.
Linda Flanders, my daughter's a junior here at Lincoln, and I'm here to represent for women's program.
My name is Aaron Barnes. I teach music here at Lincoln. My daughter is a first grader at Ainsworth. Portland's a teacher.
And daughter is where?
My daughter is a first grader at Ainsworth.
At Ainsworth. Great.
I'm Ann O'Neill. I'm a grandparent. My grandson is a freshman here, and I have no particular subject to boost for.
Okay. All good.
My name's Elise Stoner. I have a son who will be a freshman here next year. I have another son who will be a sixth grader at West Sylvan, and I'm also the former president of the Broad Mile Foundation.
Thank you.
John Shuring, I have a child here at Lincoln on the foundation board here at the school.
Guys, thank you for being foundation activists. This is awesome.
I'm Ted Wolf. I'm a parent of two graduates of Grant High School and a board member of Community and Parents for Public Schools.
My name is Jun from China. I'm from China. My son is in 6th grade at East Sylvan.
Great.
Thank you.
My name is Violet Robot, and I'm a Russian interpreter. Anybody need my services? We'll be happy to.
Jason Browser, I've got a sophomore here, I've got a 6th grader and an 8th grader at West Sylvan, and I've got a 3rd grader at Braddock.
Paige, you're up.
Paige Parker. I'm with District Communications.
I'm Tang Yi. I'm a Vietnamese interpreter. If anybody needs help, let me know.
Andres Avila, Spanish interpreter. Any needs a Spanish interpretation, please let me know.
And you guys, thank you for showing up at everybody.
My name is Ruqayya Isaac. I'm a Somali interpreter. If anybody needs a Somali interpreter.
Hi, my name is Joel Jung. I'm here with my 3-year-old daughter. Maybe she'll go here one day. Yeah.
I'm Donna Jiang, Chinese Mandarin interpreter.
Tony Gracie, cameraman.
I'm Erin Barnett. I'm also in the District Communications office.
Hi, I'm Fred Joe. I'm a photographer covering this for Portland Public Schools.
Great, and we have one more person, 2 more people joining us, so I'll let you guys introduce yourselves. Just go around and introduce yourself.
Jen Andres. I'm a parent of 3 public school students.
Okay, I'm going to do a little bit of a walkthrough, right, how the budget process works and exactly where we are in the budget process and what's going on with the state, and then I'll open it up and let you guys ask whatever things you want to ask or whatever questions you want to do. But I'm going to do you a bit of a run through because I've already brought some things to the board which are already in motion. So, we do a whole series of town halls, both before I do the staffing, I do the staff. We've now separated the budget into 2 different parts. Staffing being the part that will move first, so that we actually will do a staffing plan and then we punch go the next day so that we're out early hiring and that we're able to move all our internal processes swiftly enough that we get out and we're able to be early in hiring. And then all the rest of the budget conversations occur so that the actual formal budget proposal comes on March 31st, and I then do a formal presentation to the board. But in the meantime, we're out talking and just listening to people, and you're able to help shape what happens in formation of the budget. The other thing that's, the state allocates its state school fund on a biennium. So this is the first year of a 2-year biennium, and what number the state allocates to the state school fund is still in play. So part of what ends up being a tricky thing in a budget cycle on the first year of a biennium is we don't know what number we're really working with. So we're in the midst of advocating in Salem to try and get the number that we need. At the same time, we're trying to figure out, okay, what number are we going to use to actually budget with that doesn't make us then have to cut later. But that also doesn't undersell what we need. So it's a tricky whole process. And what happens, once I propose the budget, then the board is out doing a bunch of listening sessions after that, so they can still make adjustments to it. We then do an approved budget and finally adopt a budget in June. So it kind of spans a big stretch of time. State funding update. We've done all of the state yes,
Sorry. So let's bring it down one level more. When do the schools get their number to know what
I'm
they're...
going to take you there.
Okay,
So you
thank
can
you.
hang with me for just a minute. Literally, I'll lay out everything about where we are, and they already have their staffing numbers.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
so state, we're advocating for, we work together, so the COSA, which is the Federation of Oregon School Administrators, OEA, which is the teachers union, the Oregon School Board Association, STAND for Children, Chalkboard, all the educational advocacy organizations. We try and get lined up around what the numbers are we need in order to hold current service levels across 197 districts, all of whom have really different local contexts. So the number we've said works generally for all of our districts is 7.5 billion over the biennium to be able to hold current service levels and offer full day K, which is a thing that we're all mandated to do this year. Portland, 98% of our kids are in full day K, so the state has funded half day K. We have done the other half, either with title dollars in our schools that qualify for title dollars, or tuition in our schools that don't, so that families could opt for full day K. This year, we can't use title dollars, we can't use tuition, so we have to use the state school funding in order to do it. If they don't fully give us the dollar amount it requires to do it, then it just pulls away from the other grade levels in order to fund full day K. So a little bit of a tricky situation. The 7.5 billion holds us with what we're doing now and lets us implement full day K. Where we are right now, we're at this 7.235 billion is the number the co-chairs put forward, and that the legislative leadership is saying their framework as they put together, here's what we're spending on health and human services, public safety, and education. The number they are saying pretty assertively that works for education is the 7.235. For Portland, it's $120 less per kid than in the current biennium, and it's $13 million short of being able to do full day K without taking from other grade levels. So we're heavily advocating for 7.5. What we want is an investment budget, which is the 7.875. So 3 levels. This is the poster, the graphic that we're using, and we're in heavy advocacy mode. That's just what I just told you. The 7.5 gives us current service levels and supports implementation of full day K. The 7.235, 120 less, and the 13 million shy of doing full day K. The other things that we look at, so we have grants that provide wraparound services that we try and then bring over into general fund, so we aren't doing the cliff of you do something cool for 5 years that works for kids and then it goes away as soon as the grant goes away. We want to be able to pull that over into our general fund. If we aren't funded at the 7.5, those things just go away, so you quit doing the things that were grant funded. And we have a couple opportunities to leverage partnership with Multnomah County to add mental health counselors and attendance workers. These are great things when Multnomah County will say, we'll pay for half if you pay for half, and we get 4 people instead of 2. So we've got some great leveraging opportunities we want to be able to say yes to. Those go away if we aren't funded at the higher level. And then there are a number of things we're working on that we lose momentum on. I'm not going to do a bunch on this at this moment, but there are things like CTE and technology and things that just keep us up to pace that we get stalled out and we don't get to keep moving forward. Okay, so the budget framework that we're using, our vision, equity and excellence, every student, every teacher, and every school succeeding. Our mission, every student by name, prepared for college career, participation as an active community member regardless of race or class. Our strategic framework, which is about the whole district as an organization and how are we, what are our values, what's the foundation that's underpinning it. And I'm not doing a bunch of detail on this. I will hook you up with things for this. I just want you to be aware we have a lot of guiding documents that shape priorities as we're going through the budgeting process. this is our successful schools framework, which then becomes a strategic document at the school level. So we're saying every school, all of our schools that end up being truly getting the outcomes we're looking for kids have these factors in place. So we are basically doing this as the guiding framework for individual schools. We have a milestones framework where we're looking at key transitions, and this is key transitions as a student moves through PPS, but it's really looking at factors that predict success as you move through our system. So being on at grade level reading when you leave third grade predicts on-time graduation from high school, as does being on track credit-wise. As you enter 10th grade, 5 times more likely to graduate in 4 years as opposed to taking a longer period of time or not graduating. So we use these as the way of measuring the system, but also targeting resources in places that we think they make a difference for kids strategically. Okay, then we've gone down further and said these are the 3 priorities we're really focused on in the next 3 years. The third grade reading one, which high predictor of on-time graduation. If we have 100% of our kids reading by the time they leave third grade, they're going to be able to take advantage of so many more things as they're moving through our system without having remediation. They'll be able to, again, opportunities open up if you are literate by the time you leave third grade. We also want to reduce our exclusionary discipline, both overall and how it disproportionately is impacting our students of color. And I'm going to, yeah.
I just have a question about that third graders.
Yeah.
Okay. What kind of percentage do we have today?
So it's set with 75%, and we brought, so this benchmark has changed a bunch because as we set our third grade reading milestone, the state has changed cut scores, and they've changed what used to be, when we first set it, we had exceeding as our benchmark, and so it was like 53% were exceeding. They then changed the cut score to be something in between what was formerly meeting and exceeding. So I could tell you we've gone from 53% to 75%. There's some changes in cut scores.
But on kind of the current,
we're like at 75 now.
On kind of the current metric, we think we're
like
quarters of the
75.
way there, and so there's.
And we're doing, and you'll see, some of what we're targeting are things that we think, we've added some things like reading specialists in particular schools, dyslexia training. We've done a couple of those for early, our early grade teachers. So, and you guys, if I start doing questions now, we're never going to get through. Let me just do go ahead, let's do one more.
It's more about, as you were going through, I was just hoping maybe you could speak a little to these 3 priorities on the west side, and not just as a district as a whole.
And you'll see when we get through, this is probably why just hang with me through it. I'm going to give you, and then we'll talk about anything you want to talk about, but otherwise we'll get really diverted and you won't even hear the budget. So hang with me. Accelerating trajectory of increase in our 4-year and 5-year graduation rate is the third priority. Budget assumptions, again, the 7.5 is the maintains our current service levels. Our difference in Portland is the fact that we have a local option. So we passed a local option here. Not every community gets to do that. And what that means for us, we had 3 things in renewing our local option that produce an increase for us, renewing it and just factors in the economy. One is previously dollars got diverted from our local option to urban renewal. When we renewed it, we recaptured almost $4 million, big deal for us. Secondly, assessed values have gone up. We recaptured dollars that way, and compression has been unwinding. And compression, complex thing that's about tax values and assessed values. But the positive for us is it's unwinding, and we're collecting more that is going to education. So we gain about $10 million more than last year in our local option, which is a situation Portland's in that's different. So even with that $7.2 billion, we are in a position that we're adding teachers as opposed to cutting. A number of other districts will be cutting. If it stays there, they'll be cutting days or they'll be cutting teachers. So unique to Portland, we're really lucky. And then finally, I'm looking at doing keeping 4.5% in unassigned contingency, so in reserve, which is pulling it down from where we would want it to be. But guiding principles, trying to sustain and build on current levels of service to students, families, and schools. So we're working to not take apart things we've just added in the last couple of years. The 3 priorities: strengthening our capacity at schools and strengthening our organizational capacity to support schools. Okay, now school staffing, and you'll see West Side. You'll see some of this on West Side stuff. So we're working on building upon the work of district staffing teams in the last 2 years. So investing resources by school type and achievement needs, not just by number of kids, and providing enough time for a resource to make a difference, not like changing up your strategy every year, but trying to say, leave it there long enough to see if the strategy works. We're maintaining the equity formula that we started 3 years ago, which lets us differentiate when you've got a set of factors. 4% of it goes for poverty, the other 4% goes for poverty, ELL, special ed, and for historically underserved racial groups. So there's an 8% holdback of staffing that then gets reallocated for the degree to which those factors exist in your school to try and give a boost of adult capacity. We then do a set of non-formula additions if you have things like a split campus or CTE programming like at Benson, where it requires a little bit more intensive staffing. We have schools that are heading into implementation of the bond, where it requires a different intensity of staffing to actually manage the program you're offering, moving to a new building, planning for a new building, all of those factors, and then minimizing disruption. And then finally, we hold back like a pool of FTE that allows us to respond to things that are different than what we predicted. Some of those we release right away. So a school can't offer the core program because for some reason they bring it forward, and we'll acknowledge that that's an issue that didn't get met by the formula, and you get additional staff to make it work. And a piece that is set aside all the way till the fall, because kindergarten is the hardest one to predict. If we have more kids show up, we want to be able to be responsive immediately to more kindergartners showing up. There's the equity allocation I just described, the 8% that we hold back, and the order in which they get allocated. So this was a presentation for the board the other night where people really need their heads around how do we allocate our staff. And this is all in the next slides. Okay, so PSU is forecasting we're going to have 585 more students next year. We get 33 more staff that go into the system in order to accommodate the additional students. Local option, it gives us 140 additional teachers to what we have in the current year. So we feel really lucky in Portland that we're talking about more teachers rather than less.
And this is given the $7.2 billion?
This is given, even with the $7.2 billion, this is all about local option, which is really voter directed locally, that it's used for teachers. So this is what I already presented to the board, and we've already punched go and said to schools, go forth and
so potentially it could be more.
Not necessarily more teachers. So yes and no. So it's not the school-based staffing. We just did all in one fell swoop and punched go and said go forward and staff. So we do all the school-based staffing. The other things that'll end up being, and I'll take you through in just a second. So the early lit things in the staffing that we think impact early literacy. We're looking at adding educational assistants in kindergarten classes for schools with 50% or more combined historically underserved, so it's 29 schools. And targeted early literacy support for focus and priority schools, which is 8 FTE in focus and priority elementary schools. And it's to work on either directly with students or with teachers in that school on boosting literacy capacity. On reducing exclusionary discipline. Okay, so our counseling over the last couple of years, we have taken our high school counselor ratio from, it was 400 to 1. This last year we brought it down to 350 to 1 and then down to 300 to 1. So we're working to hold it there. And we added full-time in the last couple of years, full-time career coordinators that were part-time. We got them to full-time. And so the high schools that have gotten a boost of a bunch of out of the classroom support adults. Our elementary schools this last year, we had up until last year, we probably had 10 schools that still had no counseling presence. Last year we got them partial counselor, like a 0.5 as the minimum. This year we're trying to get everybody to a Nobody's got less than a full-time counselor in your building, regardless how big or small you are. And then above that, we're trying to get a 400-to-1 formula that adds additional counseling capacity. But we're focused on our elementary, K-8, and middle schools as how we're bringing that up. So in our K-5s, 14.5 FTE, down to a minimum of one person, a full person. In our Ks and middles, same thing, but 21.5. And then again, the educational assistants in kindergarten, we also think NCLEX, the reducing exclusionary discipline. We've got a surprising number of kids who are suspended or expelled as early between kindergarten and second grade, and really saying having the additional capacity in the classroom to come up with other strategies besides sending somebody home, we think will make a difference. And so you don't set the pattern of exclusion. So, okay, our high school graduation one. We're increasing the elective offerings in our middle grades, so the K-8s and middle schools. And this one, again, the K-8s will all get an additional 0.5, everybody. The middle schools get an additional 0.2, mostly because they've already got pretty good elective offerings, whereas our K-8s have really skinny elective offerings. If, in fact, as a school, you already have art and music, then you can feel good that you already have art and music. If you don't have it, we're asking you to add it with this staffing addition. Or if you are getting AVID this year, and we have a number of schools that we're getting to add AVID, which is like advancement via individual determination. It's a national program that really works with kids, high school, middle grades, and actually we've got some elementary schools doing this too, but it's building your study skills, your ability to access advanced curriculum, college readiness kinds of things. We have 3 high schools that already have this. We've been building back through their clusters. We're adding 3 more high schools this year, and then we hope to add the other 3 next year. We did it by readiness of principals to say, yes, we're ready to do it. And then we've got, I'm going to say, is it like, do you know how many middle schools? I'm going to say like 6 middle schools, like 6 middle schools that are adding it this year. And we've got support from Nike School Innovation Fund and Miller Foundation to help us do this year, but we've got to be able to match it in order to say yes, again, one of those. But a big deal one, and it helps us to start build systemic capacity to support kids being college ready. So we're excited about that. And then finally, high school teachers, 20 FTE across our high schools that lets us just continue to build program for kids at the high school level. So we're inching our way forward. Last year we did similar of adding a boost. And this is wide open, not but last year when we added, we said we wanted you to add, at the high school, we wanted you to add career technical education programming. This year, wide open. Athletics, and again, another thing we've been working to build back over the last couple budgets, because it's one of the things that was decimated through the budget cutting years. And we've added back in the last couple budgets, transportation, coaching, trainers, and programming at the middle grades, trying to build the feeder strength to the high schools. So this year, what we're looking to add is taking our middle school athletic director to full-time so that they can really help support the programming at the middle grades. Taking our high school, individual high school athletic directors to full-time. Right now, they're staffed at 0.5, and the high schools will match it. We want to fund them as full-time athletic directors so they can help direct the programming for the whole cluster, so that they're housed at the high schools but managing programming for the cluster and what's feeding to them. And then outdoor school, this is a different pot of dollars. We get money through the Multnomah Education Service District that we had gone down to 3 days for outdoor school. We're bringing it back up to a week. So, and this is the one I probably received the most positive email about being happy that we're going back to the week. So, but really exciting, and Portland plays a big role in the overall outdoor school system about the health of the whole system. So we're excited to be back to a week. Okay, strengthening schools overall. We're looking at school secretaries going to a minimum of 2 full-time secretaries at every school. And again, this mostly impacts some of our smaller schools that have fractional people as opposed to full-time secretaries, and critical role played in our schools. And then educational assistants and paraeducators, we're adding 5 substitutes of each of those so that we're able to do continuity of service when we have absences. So excited about that. And that is it. So what we've done so far is staffing, punch go, principals are staffing based on what you just saw. If we end up with the 7.5 billion, so what I was describing earlier is if we end up with the 7.235 billion number, what I will do is go back to the board, put a priority on holding current service levels, and try and ask the board to drop further into reserves in order to have hold current service levels, so that we're not, like, it makes no sense in this economy to end up having the economy recovering, having this year has been the first year in my superintendency, which is 8 years, that we did not cut, so that we were in a stability mode. We should so be in a building mode. We should not be cutting. So I will go back and ask the board to drop reserves in order to hold steady if we end up at the lower number. And which will include some of the things like holding some of the grants steady as opposed to cutting loose services to kids that we were able to do via the grants, and keeping steady with some of our technology needs and just basic things that allow us to keep doing forward motion. If we are at the 7.5 level, then we are able to hold current services. We start full day K. We hold our reserves at 4.5. And we actually even get to do some things that are, like the CTE one was adding something for 7th graders. So we do outdoor school in 6th grade that is doing an experiential kind of education. It would add a makerspace experience in 7th grade and a career exploration thing in 8th grade. So there are some things like that that let us just keep moving what kind of experiences we're creating for kids. So that's it. Now, questions, and I will take yours first since I asked you to hold until I got done. You would in stripes.
Me?
Yeah.
So, so I could introduce myself. I'm Ellie Korgold. I'm one of the presidents of the Ainsworth Foundation. And we are in auction season, as I'm sure you know. I guess my question comes from the fact that so much of this budget and every year's budget seems to assume the foundation contributions at this point. For example, when you're talking about the art and music at the middle school level, I know that at West Sylvan, they have foundation contributions, they have fundraisers, they've increased their class sizes so that they can have art and music. And what it sounds like you're saying is, okay, so that's, when you start adding in music in the middle school level or art, they don't get anything, right? They're right where they are. We're counting on the foundation. And I feel like, at least from the Ainsworth position, we're starting to feel donor fatigue. Our parents are tired of having to give thousands and thousands of dollars every single year when, we watch the school board meetings, we go to them and we hear a $20 million surplus, a $10 million surplus, the superintendent's top 3 priorities, and nothing is coming back to raise our baseline at all. Our baseline is staying where it is, sometimes even dropping a little bit. You look at the funding per student at Lincoln versus some of the other high schools, or you look at Chapman versus all of the other elementary schools, and even including our foundation funds, we are rock bottom. So my question is, what are your priorities for us? And we see the citywide priorities, we are thrilled to give to the equity fund. Giving a third of what we raise is amazing, it's an honor. But when it comes to bringing money back to the city, why are we not seeing any increase in our basic staffing at our schools?
So you asked a huge number of questions.
Yes, I totally did.
But I'll do a couple things on this one. So like when I just described to you, this is the year we're in right now is the first budget in the superintendent for 8 years. We've cut massive amounts out of our budget over that time period, coming on the heels of decades of cutting since ballot measure 5, and I think the fatigue in everybody in terms of talking about budget cuts and raising money, like we've counted on our foundations truly exactly as you described in order to provide basic services to our kids. I feel like some of the corner we're turning, and again, this was the first year that first day of school going around, people were doing yay, as opposed to lamenting having taken apart a team they built or taking, cutting loose strategies that they know work that now they can't do. I mean, truly, that every year we've been and we've created people who are good at improv and even our equity formula that we described here, like the first 2 years, all it did was do that you had fewer cuts, not that you got to really add anything. So it's not like you had to add a strategy, you just fill the pothole. So your experience is similar to everybody in the district in terms of feeling like we don't. And I feel like part of what we're trying to do is, I feel like part of what happens as we start getting into healthier financial territory is the work the foundations do, or PTAs do, or individual school communities do, starts to be more discretionary. What are the things you want to invest? We're not there yet. So the face is because we're not there yet. Like when you hear me describing the $7.235 billion number as $120 less per kid than the years we're in, and 13 million short of us being able to do full day K, which we're mandated to do. We're as a whole state not there yet. So like your experience is real. I think as we start to, and I think this is part of what the advocacy is with Salem, is like they're looking at education pre-K through higher ed. Higher ed's getting a little bit more. Early ed's getting a little bit more. What's the chunk that's gone down? K-12, right? And they're basically feeling like, okay, we give you the same number or a little bit more, but not looking at cost increases or any of that, so that what it ends up really being is a decrease, and it's more kids because we're now funding kindergartners at full rather than half. So, so just to say, like, it's, I feel like what we're trying to do is build a base that everybody has and that is consistent across our whole system, and so that what is ultimately happening for foundations or PTAs or local efforts is that you feel like you're getting to do things that are important specifically to your school, as opposed to that you're the one having to do the basics. Like the only way we're getting basics is by having our parents be the ones who are fundraising for basics, and we're not there yet. So I'm just acknowledging, I know we're not there yet. Yes?
Back on that, adding FTEs for art, to prioritize art and music, K through MS, can you speak a little more specifically? Sorry, I have a little hoarse today. When you talked about adding the 17 FTEs, prioritizing art and music in
So it's
K
specifically
through
for middle
8.
grades, and here's what I'll tell you.
Middle grades, not K through 8.
Right, the arts tax let us add K-5 arts teachers. We've been like fairly consistent at holding on to what we've got in the high schools, and where the gap is in the middle grades, and what we're trying to really do is build articulated arts programming, band that you could be familiar with when you're in elementary school, that somehow you see carried through the cluster. We just added back an arts TOSA, our teacher on special assignment, to look at like coherency across the district and in individual clusters and what our offerings are. So as we're getting to build back, we have some kind of coherent plan about how we're adding it. But where the gap was, we had, I think, 8 of our K-8s that had 0 art. And partly we have K-8s with middle grades that are tiny, and so they have a small number of teachers teaching everything, and what they'll do is look at the middle schools and say, the middle schools have all these elective offerings, now, and we have none. What we were trying to do is give a boost to the K-8s with small middle grades that end up being under elective offering capacity. How's that? So that's part of what the effort was this year, is to fill a gap. Yeah.
As a parent, I'm feeling very frustrated because your presentation is wonderful in terms of the numbers, and we see the success, the turnaround, and it's translating into FTE. The goal is based on graduation rate and capturing and retaining so many students, reading levels at certain grade numbers. Every time we look at those measures for success, what are we doing or what are we showing as a means of supporting the programs within it and centering it on music, which is why I'm here. Parents are selling Christmas wreaths so we can put safety features into the music room and build a platform. We're selling Bob's Bread Mill packets so we can get buses to the practices and the competitions. where is the support for what you're building? Another teaching position, but where is the music to support that? Where are the instruments, the repair, the clinicians? Oh, and you know what? It's easy to pick on music. I'd be more than happy to broaden that to art.
You can do that
in
across
general.
the, can I
And
tell you what?
science labs that go sit empty.
You can do this across, like, our district, and we are not alone in Oregon. And I'm going to say, since ballot measure 5, like, really, truly, investment in education and the percent of the state budget that's gone into education has been on a steady, like, we're just now starting to pop it back up. So we've got huge, like, athletics, when I'm telling you, we're just in the, like, a couple years into the rebuild. Music, same thing. So we just allocated $1 million in February for musical instruments. Small number. I mean, really small number, and again, it's filling gaps. So, like, we're making incremental steps as we have the ability to do it. And we have a person right now who's identified to help build the plan of what's the build back. And I do think, actually, Kristen Brayson is our arts TOSA, and I do feel like she's been doing a fabulous job for a lone person representing, like, I would like to see us doing for the arts what we're doing for athletics in terms of really building a plan for building back the arts. So, yes.
Yeah, I'd like to speak to that. First of all,
Good.
Kristen Brayson's phenomenal.
She's made a difference in a minute.
And music isn't even her primary focus. She's a dance
And she
instructor,
still is
dance
doing it.
teacher. And, but something I can speak to as both a music educator in Portland and a music educator who's worked in other districts is that we have extremely subpar music programs for a district our size. Salem, I mean, they have incredible music programs. They have full orchestra, band, and choir programs at every school. It is well articulated. Something I like is that you're building it from the bottom up.
Yeah.
When I got to Lincoln, there was no music program. So the kids would go through Sylvan, wherever they started in elementary school, and then they would have nothing to do here. Which made me really sad, but it also made my job a little bit easier, because at least there were kids that did it. But what about the clusters that don't have anything? You know, Benson has no music anymore. Beverly Cleary doesn't offer a music program in the same fashion that West Sylvan does. What about the kids at Jad for Roosevelt? I mean, and then if you come back to Lincoln, kids don't really have the opportunity to take it because we stress IB so much, which has its merits. But are we trying to add prestige to our degree or our diploma, or are we trying to educate human beings and really help kids develop a sense of what it is to be a human? Howard Gardner has the multiple intelligences. Not only does our art and music in there, they're separate, they're different. And yet we don't educate the whole human here, and we're supposed to, I'm at a loss. I'm super frustrated as a teacher because I have no resources. The hundreds of thousands of dollars we've raised has been on our own backs. And it breaks my heart to ask people to contribute all the time. I mean, I totally relate to what you're talking about, foundation. I think parents are tired of, oh, the band wants something again. Well, or we have nothing. I mean, we're doing the equivalent of educating kids in art as far as stick figures and saying, there's your art education. And then we focus all of this time and energy on athletics, which I was an athlete since I was 4. I didn't do marching band until I was a senior because I thought it was dumb. Right now I think it's great, but the point I want to make is that why are we're so convinced that curriculum is where it's at and all this development, and then when we get a chance to raise money for athletics, we skip the arts, which were demolished in the 90s, as you know, and it's embarrassing. And music is a huge value in my family. I have a 6-year-old that I won't send to schools in my own neighborhood, partly because of that. And you want to redraw the boundaries so that we have to go to neighborhood schools, and I'm gonna go get a job in Evergreen again where I can take her to school with me. And it's a terrible feeling to have so little pride in the district where I live and work. And it doesn't make me want to fight for it, but I'm here with my daughter. Again, I take her to work with me all the time. I only have her half the time. How many sacrifices does she have to make so that I can advocate so that she can have an education someday that's worthy of recognition? I don't know what to do. I'm so confused that I can't stand in front of my students and say, you're in the right place. I can say, I'm glad you're here, and I'll do my best, but that's not good enough. I mean, there wasn't a single dollar allocated from the district budget for Lincoln ever since the history of our program, 8 years ago. And it's the same thing as the foundation. It's because we will. Our community will continue to do it. But I'm not a wealthy person. My daughter's in Ainsworth because it's halfway between my house and her mom's, who lives in Beaverton. It's not because we thought Ainsworth was the best school. It's because we didn't like the schools in either of our neighborhoods, and it happened to be halfway in between. I don't think that's acceptable. And I think that we can always say, well, what other cuts are we supposed to make? You know, we can't cut back on English. Well, then we have to have a paradigm shift in our society. And I think the schools, the districts, and their lobbying organization has to work harder in Salem. I'll change jobs. I will become a lobbyist for PPS. I will become a fine arts administrator. I have my degree. I would love to supervise music.
So we have a bus going to Salem on the 3rd, is this right, April 3rd, that is specifically for families, for parents, for students, and supported by for our board and our district lobbyists to go down and talk to legislators in Salem. And I totally hear what you're saying in terms of what just the experience of feeling depleted and not invested in. I had a librarian who came to an earlier budget hearing who talked about ballot measure 5, $17,000 a year going into individual school libraries. Like that is so, and the superintendent had a pot of money, and I know this because I actually meet regularly with the person with Matt Prophet, who was superintendent, the last superintendent, as ballot measure 5 kicked in. He had dollars that he could just say yes to people who had good ideas. Like I have been so far from that in this role in terms of, and so like for me right now, I'm appreciating our ability to start building back arts, and the opportunity being at the front end of this is getting to on purpose say what do we want and what are we trying to build. So, and again, have we really had much to work with? No, we've had skinny little amounts of what do we get to add back, but I'm feeling the appreciation of being able to finally add back after years of cutting. And not just doing the, okay, $30 million again, and here we are chopping big chunks out of it.
Maybe education shouldn't be funded, like maybe athletics should be funded with something else. If we're going to fund $1.9 million, well, we're going to match it immediately. There's no question. How about we all work together? That's the first rule of advocacy. You all work together. You don't work in, so if the education folks say, well, if we want our 1.9, we got to help the music and arts folks or whatever.
So I think good concept. I'm going to tell you, like we've got a huge number of artists in Portland who totally want the arts to be thriving here because it's your future arts audience. If we aren't exposing kids to arts in the schools now, we deplete what the arts are in our city in the go forward. So we've got numbers of people who will come in and help us work to build arts and arts culture in our schools. And I think having the arts tax is a huge opportunity for us.
I challenge you to set aside a budget for a music administrator, and I will apply for that job.
A music administrator.
An actual administrator, like Evergreen or Salem has.
Or like what we have in athletics. So this is what I'm saying, like I do.
But an actual administrator did not at Tulsa, and I'll apply for it.
Yeah, and like, so we have a district athletic director, a district arts director. Yeah.
Because otherwise we won't get a bill.
And I'll take the challenge. Okay, so yes, you.
My name is Eric Leonard. I'm the president of the Bridal Mile Foundation, and would echo that I'm seeing some serious donor fatigue. And I cringe at the idea this year of having to present the budget where, we are hearing about the renewal of the levy and increased funding, and it looks like we're going to have to go back to a spring campaign for fundraising in order to maintain what we have. Right now we're paying for PE, library, and half of a tech teacher, which we may not be able to hold on. He's had more impact than any single teacher in our school, but he is a very talented young man who wants a full-time job. And going into the 2016 test change, I know that our community is very, very focused on getting our kids ready to be able to take that test. But we just won't be able to make it. I mean, last year we gave $183,000. Right now we've raised about $135,000, which means that even to match what we have, we're going to have to raise another $50,000 off the same people. And that's really going to be a hard road to hoe.
So here's what I'll tell, when I was saying the thing about if your school is not able to meet the core program requirements, they go back and talk, your principal goes back and talks to the senior director and does the here's where we're not, and I don't know if we're talking core program requirements or not by what you're describing. If you can't meet your core program requirements, you go back and talk to your senior director. Because what we do is a formula. The formula doesn't apply to every school. You could have large numbers of kids in a grade level or spread out. You end up with anomalies at different schools that the formula doesn't work. So if that's the case, then you go back and talk to the senior director, and that's what we hold that set aside for.
I know our principal is actively advocating for the school because we're in this very funny place where we're just short. We're at the worst possible place, which is just short of the next funding step, which would totally solve our problem.
That's where you go advocate.
We were within a half to three-quarters of an FTE. However, from our perspective, three-quarters of an FTE is $110,000 because of the equity side of it, and it's just huge for a small community.
That's where they go advocate. I mean, and those are the exact things that they have to do this across all the schools, so it will be, where they'll look at what problems are they trying to solve, but that's the point of that one. I'm going to do people go up and talk to you and then come back to you, yeah.
So I have a question around the kind of new schedule this year and whether the budget or program is going to change next year with the loss of the flex time and the shortening of the period between classes and the shorter lunch and kind of the impact of it's been kind of a negative impact.
It's been a horrible schedule. We're in the process of.
Thank you for saying.
Oh, no, I have never said nothing but, like, part of this one has had multiple external pressures on it, including a state law on 130 that will be not there next year. So we've had, our Super SAC just did a hearing with students to collect input on it. Our teachers union has been collecting input on it. Our principals have been, we're in the process of doing what are the factors, and everybody's been pretty consistent about what they want to see that isn't in this one, and we'll have a little bit more flexibility about what it looks like next year. So we're looking at it right now. And then the other thing you saw in there was adding 20 FTE to the high schools. That is adding more capacity, and part of one of the things is the hope that we offer more electives in high school so that it's allowing kids to take a full day without being maxed out on I'm taking one more IB class, so that you're getting more variety of offerings. So that's the hope in that one. So, and I've got one behind you who I said to wave, and then I'll come back. I'll do you first, and then I'll go back to the
When you were talking in your slide presentation about some of the allocations, and you were talking about the EA allocation, and you talked about how there was a 0.5 FTE for that EA, but it was a 50% underserved.
So it's prioritizing schools that are serving kids who are more than 50% of your kids are historically underserved kids.
Okay.
Yes.
So my question with that is twofold. What percentage of the schools in Portland Public Schools fall into that number, and why is that number 50%? Like, how did you guys come up with that number that it should be 50% instead of 30% or 80%?
So it was one so there's a district staffing team who makes goes in and looks at the data and makes the recommendations. It's 29 schools that will get that. So the other thing I'll tell you about kindergarten, we also hold 25 as our top kindergarten number, class size. So kindergarten for us is a little more expensive. So even if we get our 7.5 million, we still are shy 3 million because from the state, because we hold that as our class size. If you go above 25, then we give you an EA, regardless of who you are. This one is prioritizing for our historically underserved, and I'm sure 50% they're probably looking at the schools and saying, okay, here's a threshold of schools that they're also looking at the data of who's struggling. So.
Do we know what percentage of the schools within the school system, what's the average underserved percentage in the school district?
The average historically underserved? Yeah, I don't know. Do you know that number? I don't know.
But there's a lot of schools that are like 80% and higher.
I understand that. And again, I'm trying to get a better understanding because as the past president of the Brattle Mile Foundation, people read the newspaper and they hear, oh, there's all this money. There's $8 million that's been found and all that. But as we all know, people want to know, well, what does that mean to me? What does that mean to my neighborhood school? So sort of a tip to the communications staff, as you're feeding this news to everybody, you might want to be a little more transparent, because it does make it very difficult for the foundations to raise money when they're like, but we just got $8 million and there's this, this budget here, and why do I need to give more? And then you throw in, well, yeah, but these schools that are historically underserved are going to get more, and what does that mean? And we spend a lot of time trying to work the numbers so that our community would understand. And we don't want to work against you, we want to work with you.
It's a tough message. I'll tell you, I'll put the finger on the sore spot that you talked about, which is we contribute a great deal to the equity fund.
Yeah.
On top of that, we also, through our home taxes, pay more per student into PPS than the majority of the city. So that's fine, that's all good. Problem is, we also have 16 or 20%, of our students who have exactly the same profiles, educational, like socioeconomic, cultural, everything. But our 20% get funded as though they're not like that. As though they're like the rest of our school or our students. And so we're struggling where, I don't know, the proportional, we don't get as much per student for those kids as kids facing the same challenges in another neighborhood.
So the equity formula, when we hold back the 8%, then we're looking at every kid in every school. So you get whatever number of historically underserved kids you have. And again, it's in that one, it's poverty is 4% of it, and the other 4% is special ed, ELL, poverty, and then the historically underserved racial groups. And that goes across everybody. So like whatever number of kids you have in your school, you may get and where schools who have high numbers of those kids, part of the intent there is that you need more adult capacity to meet the needs of those kids. Part of the reason like you don't feel bumps yet is we aren't above a baseline threshold yet as a whole system. We're still sub. And so nobody like you can go every single one of these that I'm in, no matter what part of the city you live in, everybody feels like somebody else has more than they have. I mean, they do, because it's true. It's true. You feel the fact of having been decades in being in depletion mode. I mean, everybody is, and we're not above a water line yet. Like we're not. We don't have full-time librarians in our schools. We're just getting full-time counselors, and we have huge need for counselors. So you've had elementary schools with no counselor in it. I mean, truly, like the experience is real. I'm just saying it is. And like the schools that have been fortunate enough to be able to like raise dollars in your community, it's also been a blessing of having that be shared across the system when you have other communities that can't. So I'm just going to also say thank you for having done that. And my hope is that we're now cresting the moment where you get to start having more discretion about how you invest those dollars, and it's not to just do our bare what we expect in our schools, as what we should be providing every kid. So yes.
So I guess I can speak to that as well. So I'm one of those people who's like very much involved in the Facebook groups, involved, with boundary adjustment, and there is a huge, huge resentment from most of the city towards our schools, towards our foundations, and I feel like we've been put in a very uncomfortable position because we certainly don't want to be in a position where we're raising, we just paid a bill, Antrim paid a bill of $300,000 to Portland Public Schools. And that was to fund music and PE, essentially. If you look at it without foundation funds, we are the lowest funded by far, so far below where everybody else is, our schools. And we're bringing them up to still the bottom, but a little bit less low. And the amount of resentment coming at our schools for that is massive. There's this perception that we are able to fund all sorts of things. We have extra playgrounds, we have a Lego room, I heard about that, and we have all sorts of like amazing things happening all the time, which I love our school. It's wonderful, but we are barely scraping by with what we have. We've got 2 programs going at once. We're trying to balance classes that you can't balance because you can't take a kid from English and put him in Spanish immersion. It just doesn't work. So my son's in a class of 33 kids. And I think you look at that and you realize that like when these surpluses happen, we're the last ones to even be considered. So my question for you
So I'll
is,
tell you, on the last surplus, that was all done across the board. So two things. One, I'm going to say the surplus thing is wrong language for it, because part of what we've done, when part of what happened that we had the dollars that we released in both in October and in February this year were increased tax collections. And we don't get to go under. We have to budget so that we at least, and we generally will end up with like 2% variance there by the end of the year, which for an organization our size is really tight budgeting, and where we've really built a culture of don't spend for people. So like even if you don't have to spend it, don't spend it, because we want to be able to carry it over to the next year. I mean, it's the same thing that's been operating for us. We just had a number of things that tilted to the right direction for us, meaning increased assessed value and tax collection. And what we did was, rather than hold it to the end of the year, which most districts would do, we said we're going to get it out in schools immediately. We're going to get it out in schools immediately. And they're not big numbers compared to the size of organization we are, but we did a number of one-time things that were not done by equity. They were done by distribution, like the musical instruments, like library distribution went to all of our K-8s, like K-5s, K-8s. So we did some things that were like boosting for everybody. They were not just like, okay, only.
So our schools got libraries?
We did library, we did an allocation for library books, we did an allocation for musical instruments, we did.
You might want to publicize that a
And we
little bit
did
more.
at the time. We did at the time, yeah.
so my question is,
Yeah.
like you have your 3 superintendent's priorities.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm exaggerating by saying a lot of them don't affect us quite as much. We're not really quite, a lot of us are meeting your priorities. So what are your metrics, what are your goals for our schools? What are you trying to improve for us? What are we trying to get to? What's our next step? Because otherwise I feel like in your grocery list, we already got checked off before we started. And then, because we have huge dreams for our schools, but I feel like sometimes I don't get a sense watching the school board that they have the same emphasis on improving our schools.
May I segue into that?
Yeah. And I'll answer your question.
But I mean, as a kind of part, exactly where I want to go with that is Measure 5 was cited 3 times this evening, and yet that was almost a quarter of a century ago. We keep looking at the same charts, the same model of what our schools are supposed to look like, and trying to put patches. And when we sit before the school board, they give you these pained smiles, which I saw 12 years ago when I went for kindergarten. Same thing, well, that's just the system that we have. Oregon's different. We do it. You have to call the governor's office, write a letter, get on the bus to Salem. 12 years later, from my personal experience, nothing seems to be changing. Yeah, we can see a swell and a crest, but are we actually going to look at something that can fix and make a difference as to what education should be and make it sustainable instead of just to the whims of, we're in a good year this year?
So I will echo a similar theme. And a part of why I will say ballot measure 5 gets referenced is pre-ballot measure 5, our local property taxes supported our schools. So we had more control here about what we generated, that's what went in. And it is what people go back to and say, we had arts, we had music, we had sports, we had the things people wanted. So Portland, when ballot measure 5 passed, we had the property tax limitation, we had declining enrollment. We also did a state equalization where we then now subsidize the rest of the state. So like whatever, we keep 75 cents on a dollar and we equalize it as a state, which is a right thing to do when you have urban rural. But the real impacts to Portland were real. So in terms of we actually have less dollars to work with and we have less control. It is a state who gives us a number. So we don't get to go, like that's where our number comes from. So our interaction with Salem, that's where we go advocate to get the number that we then work with. So like all that stuff's real. For us, I think part of what are we aspiring to? We are aspiring to build back arts in a really vibrant kind of way. We want the stuff in our schools that has kids wanting to be in our schools. So we want CTE and active hands-on kinds of curriculum. We want arts, we want athletics, we want really strong academics. And when we're focused on 3rd grade reading, I think that applies across the entire district in terms of building literacy for kids that ends up then serving them the rest of their life as active readers. So I think that one is district-wide. And we may have some schools that have already nailed it. I still think it ends up being one of those things that you emphasize across the district. And graduation rate. So the other one, I will say, and it's a tiring topic, no matter who you are, talking about budget cuts or not enough. It is a tiring topic. And I believe we're at a point where we get to create the district that we want. We're getting to so we had not passed a bond since 1995. We are now in the process of, like, in the last 2 summers, we've done work on 28 of our schools. Upcoming summer, we have work on another 27. And we're getting to rebuild 3 high schools and Fabian K-8. And I mean, we're on a plan that is a 30-year plan to actually look at what our physical spaces look like. That's an exciting thing to me, that we get to do that.
But it's still within a broken framework.
So what would you like to change about the framework?
I would like to know what creative energy is applied so that I love the moral concept of the equitable distribution. Mm-hmm. And I think that's very fair. But when you look at needs being differing, sometimes equal isn't equal. I don't want to think that if I just simply paid another $10,000 in property taxes and go to the poorhouse, we'll have the schools we deserve. But certainly Measure 5 cannot be the thing that's, keeps holding this down for another 20 years.
It's not. I mean, I think this is part of what we're trying to do is, like some of what we have as a state is also a volatile tax structure that ends up not being, it's a volatile tax structure. So like when we do that every year, every biennium, that's the structure we're working in as a state. I do think we want to impact what our state invests in education. It's going to be a direct impact on what it is we're able to do. So, I mean, yeah. Yes, and all the, blue t-shirts, since you haven't talked yet, and then all the way back.
Well, I came late, so maybe discuss this, but how much money does Porter Public Schools get per student? And how much is spent in the school itself?
So, we'll grab you one of those sheets.
No, I'd like to hear you.
Yeah. How much comes in from the state?
I'd like to know how much the Porter Public Schools gets per student and how much goes out per student in each school.
We'll get you that number.
No,
we have the.
I want to discuss it.
Oh, go for it.
So if you have a number.
Yeah, I mean, we have a handout that we've made.
Because I
so
read the paper, these different numbers, $8,000 per student and so forth. And if you look back in 2012, there's an article in the Oregon Plymouth Act where Don McIntyre, the anti-tax activist, was asking, basically, we have $15,000 per student.
If you'd like to proceed.
I can't read that.
This will give you a couple, so because this takes into account the different types of ways that we do staffing, so you'll see a range of what we have.
Yeah, 8,000.
Right. How much money does Porter Public Schools get per student? That says what they're spending per student in the schools.
You want to know what they get in terms
Yeah,
of the
because
schools?
the numbers I see.
It's like 6,000 something.
Okay, and the numbers I see
Yeah.
coming into the
5,
school,
9, 6
is,
grade.
this is back in 2012, where the Oregonian confirmed that PPS was getting $12,000 per student. And there's estimated as at least 12,000 up to 15,000, including other things.
I don't know what numbers they're including in the number.
And
They
it
also
was
be
confirmed by
including-
Matt Shelby, who works for you. So what happens to that other $6,000 that's not spent in the schools?
So you've got it, and you've got, like, for us, so we do our metrics against Counselor Gracie's schools, which are the other large urban school districts, who are at admin is like 4% or something ridiculously low. I mean, you're looking at, and again, when I say I don't know what numbers are going into that, if it's also including our grant numbers and our special ed, federal special ed dollars, our high cost special ed kids, you've got a whole bunch of different factors that end up giving you what our total dollar amount is. And
I understand that. It
yeah.
still seems extreme to me when you take those numbers of years ago when we were in the recession and say we're getting that much money and we can't even get 50% of it to our students.
Oh, we get more than 50, like.
That's not what I'm reading.
But, so we need the citation because it's hard for us to respond to, because that's not what's happening and we're not sending half of our
We just look at
funding.
the total amount coming in from the state divided by the number of students, and then we have the figures right here as to what's being spent per student in each school.
And you look at this one where it does the what's the funding use here, and you're looking at, because some of it is paying for buildings, paying for buses, paying for nutrition services. I mean, it's school-based stuff that ends up being, it costs money to do all the things. All of this ends up being school-based expenses. I mean, that's what. I'm going to pause you and go to the next question here. Go ahead.
So was just wondering, you were saying about the April bus down to Salem, and I was here earlier, or a few months ago, and the school board was here, and they were saying the same thing. So what, besides getting on that bus, what would you say, how should we advocate for Portland Public?
I know the legislature?
Yes.
So part of what, and our communications department, which I don't know if you want to speak to this a little bit more.
Sure.
That they're putting together a set of, like, here's, if you can't go on the bus, here are the letters you can write, here are the things you can do.
Yeah, and that's something that if that specific idea would be helpful, where it's like, these are the basic messages that would be useful. I mean, everybody obviously has their own legislator. If you need to figure out who your legislator is, I can help you find that website. Both of your legislators and both, and what can be very effective is just your own email and your own experience, where you're saying, this is who I am and the kids I have in school, and this is the concern I have. For example, parents are doing a boatload of fundraising. I'm the president of the PTA at Riki, so I know where you guys are coming from, and I also have straddled this in a way that makes a whole lot of sense to me, and I'm happy to talk to you guys more about this afterwards. We're all struggling with these same questions, and yet, I think there's the opportunity to say parents have had to carry a lot, and when is that going to end? And these are the dreams we have for our children. And those types of things are very real and very authentic. They speak to Carol, they speak to me, they speak to everybody in this room, and they'll speak to the legislators. I mean, they need to understand what is our parents' vision for their children. And that's pretty powerful stuff. Any of the things that have been said here tonight would be outstanding in an email to your legislator.
And I think going down is obviously great, but if you can't.
Right, you can hit them with email.
To be able to be heard. Yeah. And I mean, I know that Portland Public doesn't do it perfectly, et cetera, but, it is an ongoing, and it's bigger than us. And if we're going to make big changes, or if we're at least going to go with what this little bit of a turn, we got to hit it hard.
We got to at least hold on to a little bit of the turn we've seen. I mean, I will say, like, part of what legislators will say is the three parts of the budget they do: public safety, health and human services, and education. Public safety is all legislated, so it's stuff they've got to do in order to, whatever, they've got ballot measures that then say, here's what you spend. Health and human services, you leverage federal dollars. If you don't spend it there, you lose it. Education has been the easiest one to squeeze. So you look over the last number of, and our little piece of the pie keeps getting littler. And you look at, and right now where they're really looking at it is higher ed, early learning, higher ed, and K-12. And again, this round got investments at both ends. Who they hear from, Health and Human Services turns out tons of individual people who come tell their personal stories that are really compelling. Education, you hear from a bunch of advocacy organizations and superintendents and school boards and bureaucrats, as opposed to individual people coming and telling who is compelling. We had a student who was just down from Umatilla who was like the most compelling testimony of the day. He's the only person anybody will remember that spoke on the day I was down there. So like Gwen Sullivan and myself and Bobby Regan went and did our testimony, all factual blah blah stuff, our stuff, and we got covered by the newspaper. This kid, so powerful down there telling his story. So I'm just going to say, like, the degree to which people go and are really 3 minutes personal. Yeah. And here's what it's meant. 3 minutes. Here's what we've been doing in our school foundation.
Your fatigue, your frustration.
How many generations of foundation in a school where you feel like you're like providing for the bare essentials for the kids in your school, like that we haven't even crested that yet. Anyway, it's powerful, and it is. They will tell us, you guys don't bring enough. You don't bring enough people.
But I'm saying that if we can't. I mean, yes, I think face-to-face, I'm part of this music group that it just frustrates me to no end that we have music, but except for the teacher, we don't fund it.
There's
And
no expense budget. There's no expense budget.
there's no.
There isn't, I know.
And it's like,
You can't even buy music.
Right.
exactly, and I feel like, and again, I've come to these meetings and everything, and I know that I'm not, singling anybody out, but it's like, really?
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
So, yeah. So will we be able to, the communications office, will you put the information out?
Yes, and first what I want to do is get, so we have a list of everyone who's been here, but I'd like to connect with you
Okay.
personally to make sure I communicate with you directly, so that you have what you need. And then I want to make sure that, I know there's a little bit of limits on what we can do that looks like advocacy. So I want to make sure I'm not crossing those lines to 40,000 people, but then as soon as I understand that, I want to get an email out with these ideas, because we want to help people. We want them to understand, what's at stake and where we're at. And obviously Superintendent Smith also hears what you're saying, and this is why she's here tonight, so that she can process some of these concerns and where you're coming from. That's the value of this. So
I will say too, like the foundation thing and what we do with that in terms of the fatigue, the how do we shift that feeling, experience of it too, where people are just like, again, as we're still not back to being as healthy as we want to be as a core of what we're doing. When you're describing the Facebook traffic, totally disturbing in terms of like what it is that you end up experiencing. And I will say, like the degree to which the equity fund is like a really nationally touted model at this point, that we do what we do as a community. It's like, I'm really proud of what we do as a community, that individual schools do the kind of fundraising they do, and we do how do we end up all, you get to do your stuff at your school, but we're also taking care of our whole community at the same time. I'm proud of that, and I hate what you're describing that you see in terms of trash talk.
Well, I think
this is
I guess this is my concern, and it's like, I see what we're doing, and I actually joined our foundation board so gung-ho about the equity component. I was like, we should be giving 50%, we should be doing this. And then you look at the numbers, right? And you realize, and I don't think I'm exaggerating here, a lot of our families feel like it's like a shakedown, right? That they are being given not enough for their children's education, asked to, it's a game of chicken, right? You're not going to let your kid go to school without music. You're not going to right? So you pay for it, and then a third goes away, right? And I think that it's somehow completely manipulating the point of it. Like and so we are ending up having families who feel like there's something so wrong with the system. That it's like, if what your goal is for foundations, that it would be adding to things, bringing extras that are...
Well, and I know we're not there.
We're so not there.
This
was
created in a crisis.
Right,
I mean,
and I agree with that.
Crisis,
and so, and I think that if that were the case, I think people would be more understanding of the equity component. Like, I personally love it, but I think that it's a harder sell. And I think that the hardest part of it, of all for me, is that in the end, it feels like the way that the city perceives it is just that this is like nothing for us. Like, I heard one of the school board members up at talking about technology and how he had been at Forest Park. And they just had this cool setup with one of the technology companies, and they just snapped their fingers and they got computers. And then I'm sure you were at that same meeting.
I was.
And I was cringing because I know the head of the Forest Park group that did that, and it was blood, sweat, and tears, and their community is losing it. Like, they have to, and then the person who talks about technology is like, well, Forest Park has, computers, we're not worried about them. And so, it's just this ongoing problem where, no one's happy.
We succeed, therefore we get less.
Right, and I think...
And that's really frustrating.
I totally hear it.
And so I feel like,
and the frustration, and it's also the narrative, which is like an unhelpful narrative.
Well, it's very unhelpful. It's very unhelpful.
I'm going to do back there and then
I'm sorry. I can see my son's lacrosse practice.
Okay, go for it.
So I just want to ask this really quick. He was, he's a freshman at Lincoln. He was in that lucky year of kids where it was pointed out that PPS high schools were in non-compliance with the number of instructional hours. And so he had forecast, on his forecast sheet as an 8th grader, it said, do not take a full load. You will take, they fully encourage these kids to take study hall. And as a parent, I had to go in and tell his counselor, no, we want a full, you had to sign a waiver. We understand.
You had to sign a waiver to not do a full day.
Well, this was last year, right? So then over the summer, it all came out. They added a bunch of electives. It was great. Kids that didn't want to have study hall did. And I'm sorry, it's kind of a long buildup. I just heard that the 8th graders forecasting for Lincoln this year are all being told that they have to take a full year class called College and Career Counseling.
It's a half year class.
Half year class.
So
It's a half year.
is this a way to sort of dodge that, overloading our teachers? And I mean, I understand it's a rock and a hard place, but that just feels wrong.
No, we just add, so, like, you weren't here for the beginning, were you here for the beginning?
I got in at the introductions. I think I was here for the whole slide presentation.
No, like, we're on so 2 things. We were the only district in the state that was held to the 130. So just to say, that was one that was also where we were scrambling to be able to do something that the state hasn't actually backed the ability to fully fund for going back a long time. I'm going to just say that. So what our effort has been is to continue to add, so we added 20 more FTE for high schools this year that are for course offerings, so that we're continuing to add a capacity to offer hopefully more electives, so students have more opportunity to do a variety of things besides high intensity courses like IB, AP. So we don't want to do, we're blasting you out with 8 periods of that. The 8 period day we believe, has been really instrumental in helping kids actually, we've increased our graduation rate substantially with using the 8 period day. So just to say that, so a lot has gone into trying to hang on to it, but also we're in the midst of discussions right now to try and build a manageable schedule and continue to add FTE so we can do it. The college and career readiness is really just a push to try and have kids thinking about their future. And so there's
Who's going to teach it? Is it going to be teachers or counselors?
Each individual school they're working with our college and career folks on how it's going to be offered at each school. So I don't know the specific answer for your school. But it's not a plugging a hole. It's a part of a intentional, how we're getting kids to be planful about how you use your high school experience. Okay. And think about it at the front end.
That was my concern when I heard that.
It's thinking about it at the front end, so you're really doing things intentionally and helping them to be more planful and learning how to use a bunch of the things that are available to them. So I'm going to do Amy while you're still here, because I think...
Well, I just wanted to say, kind of respond to the questions and concerns that were coming up over here, because I think it's relevant to the transparency of the whole budgeting process. I think it would be... it would do a world of good if people felt like they could look at the budget allocations for each individual school and see the same number on per student funding to every school, and then to see additional columns that deal with specific situations within that school. Federal funding coming in, 8% equity bump for this, all those different things, so that they sense that the actual per student funding, there's a parity across the district, and then to the extent that that is varied, it's from a very strategic perspective, and it's really addressing particular needs within that school, because there's this sense that like you said, and pitting one school against another, that it's very unknown, and foundations feel like, they're always, schools that are able to raise a lot of money say we're always going to be funded significantly lower on a per student basis, because there's an assumption that our foundation dollars can make up for that, when the intention of those foundation dollars is really to be supplemental, and that every kid deserves roughly the same type of curriculum or program.
So the couple things that you can go look at online, and because I think we're combining a number of different things. So there's a staffing thing that does do exactly what you're saying, where you can see here's everything that was allocated by formula, here's the admin table. So regardless of the size of school, you will end up getting some core batch of staffing that's your principal, your AP, or your VP, your librarian, your counselor, and those go up with formula thresholds. But that little core of staffing, if you are a small school, is going to look like you're a different cost per kid than a larger school with that same core. So you got a different thing. You got other factors that are influencing the per student cost. And how much do the teachers, you got experienced teachers, you got new teachers. I mean, you got, so the cost per kid is a misleading measure depending on what you're trying to measure. The staffing thing that we just did, and we just gave this, and I believe this is online, it goes in our budget book ultimately, so at the end when we finally publish a budget, you've got access to all this stuff in the budget book. But we'll do a staffing table that you see, here's everything that got allocated to your school by formula. Your principals have this right now. Here's what was allocated by formula. Here were other ads that you got that were non-formula FTE. Here were things that, you know, where your equity formula bump. Anyway, like you can, there is a document that is available to be able to see exactly that. The per student cost, again, I don't know how useful that one ends up being depending on what it is you're measuring. Like you got to extrapolate a bunch of other assumptions in it to understand what you're looking at. Like Jefferson, where it's a small school, but it still has a principal, it still has a vice principal, it still has a counselor. This many kids, we keep going up in terms of your administrators and your counselors by a student formula, but you're still going to end up paying more per kid for that core in a smaller school than you are in a bigger school. So you get what I'm tracking, yeah.
It seems like a lot of people are concerned about funding music, and I do have a question about that because I have my second kid going through Grant High School, and we've been very lucky to hire a fabulous new teacher, and it's exciting, and everybody wants to sign up for music. The program is actually growing. However, now the kids have the requirement of a full year of PE and a full year of health, and now this college and career thing, and so are we shooting ourselves in the foot? Or is it the intention is to fade out the music programs because there's so many requirements that, you know, I have a student that can't sign up for it because he can't get his requirements, and you know, he's the key member of the band. We just won a great competition. So how are they, what are the priorities education-wise, and you know, is music being looked at more seriously? Because I find that just as critical. I mean, it used to be just happier PE and happier health, and that was fine, but you know, what's going on?
And there are new PE requirements that are numbers of hours you need to be in PE that are coming down the pike in the, I'm going to say 2 years, state requirements that will present challenges all their own, because we've got, and Portland has a higher world language threshold because we tried to match our graduation requirements with the higher ed system entrance requirements, which are higher than what the whatever state board and graduation requirements are. There's a bunch of stuff that will then get bumped out by virtue of having to meet this PE requirement. So it's a right question. It's we don't have that one yet. So you're basically trying to meet graduation requirements, and the 8-period day should allow a little bit more in terms of kids having choices though than what we would be if we were on a different schedule. So yes, you. I know.
So I wanted to, you keep referring to the 8-period day, and I wanted to know, and you said that it also encourages higher graduation rates, but I wanted to know, really, I wanted you to kind of dive deeper into that. I personally have been able to I'm going to be a junior in college next year, and I've been spending about $5,000 a year at PCC. So the cool thing about that is that, you know, I've gotten a major portion of my college education and also high school education at the same time for a lot lower cost. And so, you know, and I'm in school, I'm in instruction hours, 8 hours a week. So I know that, you know, kids being in school for a full day, that costs a lot of money, especially high school students. Of course, elementary and middle school, that makes complete sense. But why is it such a huge priority that students are, you know, in class for that full 8 to 5?
I wouldn't say in class. So we're also, like, I love that that's what you're doing, yay. And we're looking to expand where we've got dual credit opportunities that students are able to earn college credit while they're in high school, which is both about having our instructors certified so they can offer college credit teaching the courses they're teaching. So it's trying to articulate our coursework with the community college so that if you're writing 121, you're taking the same content here, you can get community college credit when you're doing it. Like the middle college at Jefferson, that's part of your program. So I'm counting what you're doing at the community college as part of your program. Not that you're literally in our seats in our classes, but that you're maximizing the use of the time you've got PPS. right? And either you're doing that, which is what your program is, and God, if you end up, like, I would encourage anybody to work to get as much college credit as you can before you graduate from high school. Like at Jefferson, we right now have a deal with Oregon State, University of Oregon, Portland State, Warner Pacific, that if you graduate from Jefferson with a year of community college credits under your belt, you've got 3-year scholarship that gets you the rest of the way, above and beyond whatever year's financial aid you qualify for. That's a big deal. So like those kinds of things, I hope that we're continuing to build more of those opportunities for kids where we've got Portland State offering senior inquiry for credit in a number of our high schools. We're working the IB, AP, and dual credit. We're working to expand, and different schools have different amounts of those things where you can earn college credit while you're with us. But I count that as being part of your program, your PPS program.
Yeah, so the opportunities though, there's not very many, especially for students who are interested in doing accelerated learning. The options are none, pretty much. So I go to Portland's PCC Cascade campus. Yeah, so expanded options program got cut. I don't know exactly when, a few years ago, but now there's only the Gateway to College program and the Jeff Middle College program, and those are only offered to students who are needing credit recovery, who are pretty much failing high school and not going to graduate on time. And I feel like, accelerated learning just has not been a priority just based off of that, EOP being cut, which sucks because students aren't even really reaching out. People don't know things like opportunities like that exist. And so I've just been kind of frustrated with just the lack of opportunity. It just doesn't exist at all.
We'll know that we're trying to grow our advanced learning opportunities, and part of AVID, which I described earlier, is about helping students be prepared to take advantage of advanced learning. So just to say, I love hearing what you're saying. That's great. Yeah, really good. Yes.
So, I don't know if you guys have talked about it, but one of the ways to kind of compete for the higher education dollars is to offer higher education and to offer an associate's degree in high school. Some schools back in my home state that did that program, and it seems to work out well.
We're working closely right now with actually all the Multnomah County districts and PCC in Mount Hood on how we are doing more articulated and dual credit opportunity between our campuses. And then we actually have a Mount Hood, PCC, and Portland State are the three we're really working tightly with, trying to figure out how we do it in a way that's cost effective for us to be able to offer it. Because anyway. I'm sorry, I went over you.
I just had a quick comment about someone was talking about the requirement creep on the schedule for kids. One of the things, my older son is now at OSU, but he graduated from Lincoln, and he was in varsity athletics all the way through, and we just thought it was so silly that he had to go to PE when he's doing varsity sports.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yes.
So, got some off track here. Talk about the academics and stuff. The AP classes and the advanced classes, a lot of colleges don't accept these as credits. That's our experience. We just had some graduate with their whole college search, and they had them take their own tests and things like that. So as far as taking AP classes, and so much of the issue is the classes that they should be teaching in high school should be preparing the kids for college anyway.
Yes.
And they should be at that level of what you consider an AP class. And so the bar is lowered. And so much of the reason that they're not at that level is because of the teaching quality. And there's some, at Grant, there's some extremely good teachers, there's some very poor teachers. And trying to get rid of the poor teachers is so difficult, apparently, and they just get passed on to somebody else. I know this has been brought up before, but it's a huge issue. And, our math teachers right now are such poor quality. At orientation, pardon me?
What school?
Grant High School.
Grant?
The teacher couldn't explain what proficiency was at the conferences, open conferences. And, you should be having teachers that can raise the bar for the classes, the kids that are behind, bring them up. And a lot of teachers aren't qualified to do that.
So the one thing I'll say to that one is that we've got, our principals are really working hard on doing that kind of accountability and doing performance management. And been really, and I'm going to just say, and we've got people who are being very targeted and really specific about trying to do performance management that either helps somebody, support somebody getting better, or helps them figure out that maybe they want to be doing something different. So, and some of that's visible.
And I know what's been going on there for that.
Do you know
It's
this?
really difficult.
Is it? Okay. So I would encourage you to express things directly to your principal about.
I did.
Oh, did you? Okay. Good. Yeah.
I have another question, totally unrelated, but, so one of the things that comes up a lot in our schools is the tag system and how we have a whole push to get kids identified, and they get identified in second grade, and there's nothing for tag, right? There's just,
true,
right? And so first of all, the question is why
you guys, thank you for being here.
You know,
I'm going to do this last question too.
So the push to identify it, but then, you know, I feel like we lose families because of it, and we definitely lose faith and support for the system because of it, and I think that there's so much discussion about bringing up, you know, to these benchmarks, which I think is wonderful, but we have a lot of kids who are not having their needs met, and, you know, some of our schools have. We agree with you.
So we have, the hopeful piece of this one is we have a tag coordinator who was just recently hired full-time to look at our tag and lead our tag programming. We will probably be doing some things more centralized as opposed to spreading the resources out and then saying go forth and differentiate, which has kind of been the, and he's actively got an active parent advisory committee right now helping look at setting direction for tag. So I would encourage you to get involved with it if you have an interest. And they've been great. I will say they've been really great. So.
And is there funding that's sort of coming with that, or is that mostly just?
There is funding that goes, there's limited funding that goes along with it, so there are not additional boosts. Like you just saw everything we got right there, which was all just staff. It was not additional funding for materials or supplies or anything else. So, but the fact of investing in central leadership for tag services is a big step. Okay, guys, Principal Peyton Chapman just came back from her meeting. You want to just say, do you have any words of hello for us? And we're just kind of at the end, so I'm going to just let you say hey. Welcome, and thank you for letting us be in your building.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure always talking. I wish more people were here.
Yeah. We've had these a little bit bigger, yeah.
Well, I mean, a couple things that I can just say thank you for. We're staffed at 1,648 students for next year, and that's actually about the number of students I think will be here. And for the past 8 years, that number's always been about 75 students to 100 students anticipated less than we actually had. So I think that PPS did a really good job estimating the numbers of kids, because it seems like a big improvement. And also, it's the first budget where we're not really having to cut things. We may have to shift some things. You know, our special education department will receive a cut, but it's because of our numbers. So all in all, it's a promising budget. We're heading in the right direction. I don't know where we'll put all the kids and the teachers, but
there's a little bit more space in here, Peyton.
There's no more room in here.
I know.
Yeah, and you know, adding programs across our system like AVID that really recognize that they're historically underserved kids and nearly meeting kids in every school. So the fact that Lincoln's getting an AVID program with West Sylvan, and you know, that's really exciting. So there's some really exciting pieces in the budget.
Yay. That's good. And you guys, thank you so much for being here tonight and hanging out to do budget conversation. I totally appreciate all the questions that got asked.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks, Peyton.